The first thing Wesley Rourke threw onto the sidewalk was Nathaniel Brooks's folded white cane. It struck the concrete, snapped open, and slid beneath the boot of one of the movers carrying Nate's furniture out of the building. The mover stopped, embarrassed, but Wesley pointed toward the waiting truck. "Keep moving." The court gave him 30 days. He wasted every one of them. Nate stood in the doorway of apartment 3B with one hand resting on Amos, his black Labrador service dog. His other hand gripped the cedar document box his late wife had kept beneath their bed. Two sheriff's deputies waited behind him while tenants watched from the stairwell, phones raised, faces tight with anger. "I never received an eviction notice," Nate said. Wesley adjusted the cuffs of his expensive gray coat. "That's what everyone says when the locks are changing." He thought removing a blind veteran would be an easy payday. Empty the building, sell the block to a hospital developer, and walk away with enough money to rescue his failing company. What he did not understand was that the man he was pushing onto the street was not merely another tenant. Nate's name was attached to every brick Wesley claimed to own. Deputy Marshal Eli Mercer unfolded the possession order and read Nate's name carefully. Nathaniel James Brooks, occupant of Unit 3B, failure to pay rent for 6 consecutive months. Nate's expression changed. "I don't pay rent." Wesley laughed loudly enough for the people in the stairwell to hear. "That's the first honest thing you've said." "No," Nate replied. "I mean there is no lease requiring me to pay rent." Mercer glanced at Wesley. Wesley stepped closer to Nate. "You've been living here free because my father felt sorry for you. I continued the arrangement longer than I should have. That charity ended when you started interfering with my redevelopment plans." Nate ran his thumb along the brass latch of the cedar box. "Before you take another piece of furniture out of that apartment," he said, "tell me whose name appears on the deed." For the first time, Wesley's voice lost some of its confidence. "My company S. Then you should know the legal description." Wesley glanced toward Mercer. "I'm not debating property law in a hallway. Parcel numbers 1488-21 through 1488-32, Nate continued. "The north boundary begins at the original granite marker beside the alley. The eastern wall carries a 12-foot public utility easement. The deed also contains a permanent residential covenant covering all 18 apartments." A murmur moved through the stairwell. Wesley lowered his voice. "You memorized an old document. That doesn't make you an owner." "No," Nate said. "The county recorder's stamp does." Wesley reached for the cedar box. Amos moved between them with a low warning sound. Wesley jerked his hand back. "Control your dog. He is under control. Then hand me the box." "It belongs to the property. It contains personal documents. It was removed from a unit under a lawful possession order. Mercer, inventory it." Deputy Mercer hesitated. The second officer, Elena Ortiz, watched Wesley rather than Nate. She had been called by the movers after several tenants blocked the front entrance, but nothing about the eviction felt routine. Wesley had arrived with private security, locksmiths, and a television reporter from a local business channel. He wanted an audience. Ortiz looked at the possession order. "Mr. Rourke, this writ authorizes removal of the occupant's possessions. It doesn't transfer ownership of personal records to you." Wesley smiled without warmth. "Officer, I have handled more evictions than you have traffic stops. The box may contain building documents. Then you can request them through your attorney." Wesley's jaw tightened. He turned toward Nate and spoke softly enough that the cameras could not easily catch his words. "You had 2 chances to leave quietly. Now everyone in this building is going to pay for your pride." Nate did not raise his voice. "My pride isn't the reason you brought cameras." Wesley stepped away and pointed toward the stairwell. "Clear the building. Anyone who interferes gets cited." 2 movers carried out the walnut dining table Claire had chosen 26 years earlier. One of its legs struck the doorframe. Nate heard the wood crack. His fingers tightened around Amos's harness. Rachel had eaten her first solid meal at that table. Claire had placed birthday cakes on it, sorted rent receipts on it, and once slept beside it while waiting for Nate to return from emergency surgery at the Veterans Hospital. It was not valuable to anyone else, but the sound of it breaking landed harder than the loss of the apartment. Darlene Webb, who operated the bakery downstairs, pushed past a security guard. "You can't put him outside," she said. "His medications are in there." Wesley faced her. "Your commercial lease expires next month, Ms. Webb. Think carefully before making yourself part of this. You raised my rent 40%, and you are free to conduct business somewhere you can afford." Darlene pointed toward Nate. "He gave me that storefront when every bank in the city turned me down." Wesley looked toward the reporter. "My father gave her that storefront," he said. "Mr. Brooks has spent years taking credit for other people's generosity." Nate turned his face toward Wesley's voice. "That's what you tell yourself. It's what the records show." Then let Officer Ortiz read the ownership line aloud. Wesley's restraint vanished. "This is over. Remove him." Mercer touched Nate's elbow. "Sir, I need you to step outside." Nate remained still for a moment. The hallway smelled of dust, old plaster, and Darlene's cinnamon bread drifting up from the bakery. He knew every uneven board beneath his feet. He knew the exact number of steps to the front door and the shallow dip in the third stair where Claire had once demanded repairs. It was the only home he had lived in since losing his sight. He bent, picked up his cane, and found a deep scrape along its aluminum shaft. Then he walked out under his own power. The tenants followed him onto Grant Street. Someone had placed his mattress against a parking meter. His military dress uniform hung from a plastic garment bag over a kitchen chair. A box marked CLAIRE, Keep Dry, sat beside the curb. Wesley emerged behind him. "You have until 6 tonight to remove everything," he announced. "Anything left becomes abandoned property." Nate turned toward the sound. "You forged something, Wesley." The crowd became quiet. Wesley gave a dismissive laugh. "Be careful. I don't know whether it was the deed, the court filing, or the rent ledger, but you forged something." Wesley approached until only a few feet separated them. "You've spent 3 years hiding in that apartment while everyone else kept this block alive. You ignored repairs. You missed meetings. You let your wife handle every decision until she died, and then you disappeared inside your grief. Do not stand on my sidewalk and pretend you were protecting anyone." Nate absorbed the accusation because part of it was true. Claire had died 18 months earlier after a brief illness. In the final weeks of her life, Nate had promised her he would keep attending meetings, speaking to tenants, and reviewing the accounts. Instead, he had retreated. He answered only urgent calls. He let Wesley control rent collections, maintenance contracts, and city inspections because Wesley had managed the block for years. Nate's grief had created an empty space. Wesley had filled it, but absence was not surrender. Nate lifted the cedar box. "This sidewalk is mine too." Wesley's face hardened. "Not anymore." He turned and entered the building while the locksmith drilled out the cylinder of Nate's front door. Officer Ortiz remained on the sidewalk after Mercer left with the civil enforcement team. She helped Darlene move Nate's medication into the bakery office and asked to see the documents he still possessed. Nate opened the cedar box. Inside were Claire's death certificate, his military discharge papers, property tax receipts, insurance policies, several braille labels, and a thick blue folder secured with an elastic band. The original deed was not there. Nate searched the box twice, touching each folder in order. "It was beneath the tax file," he said. "Could it be inside the apartment?" Ortiz asked. "No. Did anyone else have access to the box?" "Claire, my daughter. Wesley, years ago when he helped us move a safe." Ortiz examined the latch. There were fresh scratches around it. "Was it locked?" "This morning, yes." "Did you open it during the eviction?" "No." Ortiz looked toward Wesley's black SUV parked across the street. I can document that the box may have been accessed, but without evidence of who opened it, this is still a civil matter. I understand. Do you have a lawyer? My wife did. That's not what I asked. Nate almost smiled. Not yet. Darlene called a woman named Maya Patel, an attorney who had once helped her fight a predatory equipment lender. Maya arrived 40 minutes later wearing running shoes with a navy suit, her hair still damp from the gym. She listened without interrupting while Nate described the eviction, the missing deed, and Wesley's claim of ownership. When he finished, she opened her laptop at a bakery table. "What is the ownership entity?" she asked. "There isn't one listed as owner." "The deed is held by Nathaniel James Brooks, trustee for the Grant Street Residential Covenant." Maya stopped typing. "You personally hold title as trustee?" "Yes. To the apartment building, to the block." Darlene stared at him. "The whole block?" she asked. 12 storefront parcels, 18 apartments, the alley easement, and the parking lot. Darlene sat down slowly. "Nate, I have brought you free bread every Friday for 9 years because I thought you were living on a military pension." "I am living on a military pension." "You own 12 buildings." "I hold them. That is not the same as being free to sell them." Maya searched the county recorder's online database. Her eyes moved rapidly across the screen before her expression tightened. "Mr. Brooks, there is a deed recorded 7 months ago transferring all 12 parcels from you to Rourke Urban Holdings." "That is impossible." "It was notarized and filed electronically. The consideration is listed as $10 and assumption of debt." "There is no debt." "The document says there was a private loan secured against the property." "Also false." Maya rotated the laptop, then remembered Nate could not see it. "The signature is represented as yours. The notary is Geraldine Sloan. The deed was signed on October 17th of last year." Nate did not need time to search his memory. "On October 17th, I was at the Veterans Hospital in St. Louis. For the entire day, for 3 days, corneal nerve surgery, it failed." Maya looked again at the filing. "Then either someone forged your signature or someone persuaded a court that another person had authority to sign for you. I have never granted anyone power of attorney." "Did Claire?" "She had limited authority for operating expenses. It ended at her death." Maya downloaded the deed, the eviction complaint, and the judgment. "The court file says you were personally served 4 times. I was not served once. It also says you appeared by telephone and agreed to the payment plan you later violated." Nate's face became still. "What telephone number?" Maya read it. "That belonged to Wesley's old maintenance office," Nate said. The first clear shape of the scheme appeared. Wesley had not simply filed one false document. He had built an entire paper version of Nate. A tenant who owed rent, answered a summons, accepted a payment plan, defaulted, and surrendered possession. Each step made the next one appear legitimate. Maya closed the laptop. "We need an emergency motion to vacate the eviction and a separate action to challenge the deed. Until a judge freezes the property, Wesley may be able to borrow against it or transfer it to a third party." "He already has a buyer," Darlene said. "A company called Northlake Medical Development. Their surveyors were here last month." Maya looked at Nate. "Do you know when the sale is scheduled?" "No." A voice came from the bakery entrance. "Friday." Owen Pike, the block's longtime accountant, stood in the doorway holding his leather briefcase against his chest. He was 63, narrow-shouldered, and normally so precise that he corrected people who called financial statements reports. That afternoon, his tie was crooked. "Northlake closes Friday morning," he said. "Wesley plans to deliver the properties vacant within 60 days. Nate turned toward him. "How long have you known?" Owen looked at the floor. "I saw the draft settlement statement 2 weeks ago. And you didn't call me. Wesley said you had approved it." "You believed him." "He showed me the recorded deed." Nate's disappointment hurt Owen more than anger would have. "You handled these accounts for 17 years, Nate said. You knew the property could not be sold without the Residential Covenant Board. Claire was the board secretary. After she died, the filing stopped. Wesley said the covenant had lapsed. Covenants do not lapse because someone misses a meeting. Owen swallowed. I should have checked. Maya asked him for bank records, rent ledgers, contracts, and copies of all communications with Northlake. Owen nodded too quickly. I'll bring everything. Tonight, she said. I'll need time. You have until the courthouse opens tomorrow. Owen looked toward Nate, but Nate had already turned away. Rachel Brooks arrived shortly before sunset in her hospital scrubs. She found her father sitting behind the bakery with Amos's head resting on his shoe. Nate's belongings had been moved into Darlene's storage room, except for the broken table, which would not fit through the rear door. Rachel stopped when she saw it beside the dumpster. Mom's table. One of the movers broke the leg. Where is Wesley? Inside my building. She stared at him. Your building? Nate heard the accusation hidden inside the question. He had told Rachel that he managed the block after returning from military service. He had never explained that he held the deed. Claire believed publicizing the arrangement would attract developers, distant relatives, and people who would treat Nate's disability as evidence that he could be manipulated. Rachel had grown up assuming her parents rented apartment 3B in exchange for bookkeeping and maintenance work. Nate had intended to tell her when Claire became ill. Then every conversation became about treatments, pain medication, and time. I should have explained it years ago, he said. Rachel folded her arms. You own the whole block and I learned it from Darlene. I hold it in trust. That sounds like the answer you give when you don't want to answer. It cannot be sold for personal profit. The rents maintain the buildings, pay staff, and fund emergency housing for veterans and displaced families. You still kept it from me. Yes. Why? Because your mother and I disagreed about when to tell you. Then she died before we resolved it. Rachel's voice sharpened. Don't put this on Mom. I'm not. You always do that quietly. You say her name, and the conversation becomes too painful for anyone to challenge you. Nate felt the words land where they were meant to. Rachel crouched to pet Amos. Wesley called me 3 months ago, she said. He asked whether you had become confused since Mom died. He said you were accusing him of stealing. I never told him that. He claimed you had. What did you say? I said you were grieving and stubborn, not confused. Did he ask you to sign anything? Rachel stopped moving. He sent me a form authorizing him to speak with your doctors. He said the insurance company needed confirmation that you could live independently. Did you sign it? No. I called Mom's old attorney, but the number was disconnected. Nate reached toward her. Rachel took his hand after a brief hesitation. He was building a competency case, Maya said from behind them. If the forged deed failed, he planned to argue that Mr. Brooks approved the transfer but no longer remembered. Rachel stood. Can he do that? He can try. Wesley did not wait for them to reach court. At 8 the next morning, city inspectors arrived at 4 buildings on Grant Street. They posted emergency notices citing unsafe wiring, blocked exits, and structural instability. Tenants were ordered to vacate within 48 hours. Darlene's bakery was cited for a ventilation defect that had passed inspection 2 months earlier. The family above the pharmacy was told the rear staircase could collapse, even though it had recently been rebuilt. A veterans counseling office lost access to its elevator after Wesley's maintenance crew shut off the control panel. Maya compared the inspection notices. All 4 inspectors received complaints yesterday between 5:10 and 5:20, she said. The complaints came through the city portal under different names. Nate asked, same wording. Nearly identical. Wesley had made his retaliation look like public safety. He also sent every tenant a relocation offer. Anyone who left within 72 hours would receive $3,000. Anyone who remained would be responsible for legal fees, storage costs, and damage caused by delayed redevelopment. Several tenants began packing. Nate stood in the bakery and listened as families argued over whether to fight or take the money. A mother named Keisha worried about losing the school bus route her autistic son had finally learned. An elderly tailor feared his machines would be seized for unpaid storage. Two nursing students said they could not risk an eviction appearing on background checks. Nate had spent years believing the covenant itself protected them. Now he understood that paper protection meant little when people could not afford the time required to enforce it. "I should have watched more closely," he told Maya. "Blame can wait," she said. "Right now, we need evidence." Owen failed to deliver the financial records. He stopped answering calls. When Maya visited his office, it had been emptied. The computer drives were gone, file cabinets stood open, and a shredding bin overflowed with strips of paper. Building security footage showed Owen leaving at 2 in the morning with 3 boxes. Nate called him 6 times. On the 7th attempt, Owen answered. "I'm sorry," he said before Nate could speak. "Where are the ledgers? I can't help you. You already helped Wesley." Silence. Nate heard traffic and a turn signal clicking in the background. "Owen, listen to me. If he has threatened you, tell Maya. If you took money, tell her that too. But do not destroy the only records that show what happened to these tenants. You don't understand. Then explain it. I borrowed from the operating account." Nate leaned against the bakery counter. "How much?" "At first, 40,000. My wife's cancer treatment wasn't covered. I intended to repay it. Then the interest on the credit cards. How much now?" 186,000. Nate closed his eyes out of habit, though darkness was already permanent. "Wesley found out." "Yes. And he made you alter the books. He said the sale would cover everything. He said no one would be hurt because you didn't need the income. People are being put out of their homes." "I know. Where are the records?" Owen began crying quietly. "I gave them to Wesley." The line disconnected. Maya filed the emergency motions using only public records: Nate's affidavit, Rachel's statement, the hospital records, and Officer Ortiz's incident report documenting the missing deed. Judge Miriam Cole scheduled a hearing for Thursday morning, less than 24 hours before the Northlake closing. Wesley's attorneys responded with 200 pages of exhibits. They included the recorded deed, years of management correspondence, altered rent ledgers showing Nate as a delinquent tenant, and a psychological assessment written by a doctor who had never examined him. The report described Nate as exhibiting possible grief-related cognitive impairment, paranoid fixation, and compromised capacity to understand financial transactions. Rachel read the report aloud in Maya's office. "He used my statements," she said. "What statements?" Nate asked. "There's an email from me saying you stopped answering calls after Mom died and refused help with bills." "I did. There's another where I said you forgot my birthday." Nate said nothing. Rachel's voice broke. "I sent that to Wesley because he told me he was worried about you. He collected ordinary grief and rearranged it into incompetence," Maya said. Rachel pushed the papers away. "I handed him the language." "No," Nate replied. "You trusted someone our family had trusted for years." "So did you?" "Yes." That answer left neither of them anywhere to hide. At the emergency hearing, Wesley entered the courtroom with 3 attorneys, a public relations consultant, and a representative from Northlake. He wore a dark blue suit that had belonged to his father. Nate recognized the faint scent of cedar and aftershave when Wesley passed behind him. Judge Cole began with the eviction. Maya presented the false service address and the telephone number connected to Wesley's maintenance office. Wesley's lawyer called the discrepancies clerical errors. He argued that Nate had lived rent-free under an informal arrangement, but later agreed to make monthly payments after Rourke Urban Holdings acquired the property. Maya produced Nate's hospital records proving he had been under anesthesia in St. Louis when the deed was supposedly signed in Ashbridge. Wesley's attorney produced a mobile notary log stating the signing had occurred at the hospital. Maya had not expected that. The log included a copy of Nate's driver's license, the last 4 digits of his social security number, and a fingerprint beside the signature. A hospital parking receipt showed a vehicle registered to Wesley entering the garage that afternoon. Wesley testified that he had driven 3 hours to meet Nate because Nate feared losing the block to unpaid taxes. There were no unpaid taxes, Maya said. Not yet, Wesley answered. But the operating account was collapsing. Mr. Brooks understood that a transfer was the only way to protect the tenants. Why was the consideration $10? Because my company assumed liabilities exceeding $2 million. List 1. Wesley's attorney objected. Judge Cole sustained it because the hearing was limited. Maya requested an immediate forensic review of the deed. Judge Cole looked at the recorded instrument. I am troubled by the circumstances, she said, but recorded title currently rests with Rourke Urban Holdings. The plaintiff has raised serious allegations, not yet proven facts. She vacated Nate's eviction because service was defective, but she refused to restore possession immediately. The city's safety orders remained in effect, and Wesley's company retained temporary control of the buildings until a full evidentiary hearing could be held. Northlake agreed to delay closing for 7 days. It felt like a victory until Judge Cole added one condition. Nate was prohibited from entering any building on the block without Wesley's written permission. Outside the courtroom, reporters surrounded Wesley. He spoke calmly about respecting veterans while protecting tenants from dangerous conditions. He described Nate as a man he loved like family who had become vulnerable after his wife's death. Nate listened from the courthouse steps. Wesley had learned something from his father. Anger frightened people, but concern disarmed them. Maya guided Nate away from the cameras. We bought 7 days, she said. He bought 7 days too. Yes. What is he looking for? The same thing we are, proof that defeats the recorded deed. The cedar box was returned that evening with the rest of Nate's property. Officer Ortiz had arranged for the movers to place everything in a secure storage unit. The box was still missing the original deed, but Rachel found a Braille label stuck beneath the bottom lining. It contained a single word, maple. Nate ran his fingers over it repeatedly. Mom labeled everything, Rachel said. Does maple mean a cabinet? No, the cabinets were walnut. A file name. Nate lifted the empty blue folder from the box. Claire had used colors because Nate could distinguish them through raised corner markers she attached herself. Blue meant property, red meant medical, green meant banking. The blue folder had 2 raised dots. It should have had 3. This is not the folder Claire kept in the box, he said. Rachel examined it. It looks old. It is old. She stopped using 2-dot property folders at least 5 years ago. Maya opened the folder carefully. Inside was a photocopy of a deed, not the original. The pages appeared ordinary until she read the parcel description. The 4th parcel ends in 32, she said, but the county filing says 23. Nate sat upright. Read the entire number. She did. He asked her to read the forged deed again. The transposed digits matched exactly. That mistake was never in the recorded chain of title, Nate said. It was in a draft survey from 16 years ago. Who had that draft? Maya asked. Claire and me. Rachel pointed toward the folder, and whoever took the real blue file. Maya understood before she spoke. The person who recorded the forged deed did not copy a legitimate deed from county records. He copied this draft. Nate touched the Braille label again. Maple was Claire's warning. He told them about the first year he and Claire lived on Grant Street. Their apartment had a maple secretary desk with a hidden compartment behind the lower drawer. Claire stored sensitive documents there until a kitchen pipe burst and damaged the wall. They sold the desk during renovations. Or Nate believed they had sold it. Rachel searched through old photographs on her phone. Mom kept it, she said. It's in the picture from her office. Claire's office had been sealed after her death because Nate could not bear to sort through it. Wesley's company had moved the furniture into the basement storage room during a roof repair. The room was now inside a building Nate was legally prohibited from entering. Wesley refused Maya's written request for access. He claimed the desk had been discarded due to mold. That night, someone broke into Nate's rented storage unit. They ignored the television, Claire's jewelry case, and the military medals. They opened every document carton and smashed the cedar box against the concrete floor. The lid split along the hinge. Amos was not there, but Nate's folded cane had been placed inside the broken box. It was not theft. It was a message. Officer Ortiz responded to the storage facility. She photographed the damage and collected the cane without touching the shaft. "There may be prints," she said. "Wesley uses other people," Nate replied. "Usually, but people who believe they are untouchable eventually handle something themselves." Ortiz had begun examining the eviction outside her normal duties. She discovered that Deputy Mercer's body camera had been switched off for 11 minutes during the removal. Mercer claimed the battery had failed, but the equipment log showed a full charge. She also found that the same process server had handled all 4 supposed attempts to serve Nate. That server was Wesley's cousin. Ortiz could not arrest anyone based on those connections, but she sent the information to the county fraud unit. By Friday, 3 more tenants accepted relocation payments. Darlene refused and reopened her bakery despite the city notice. Inspectors arrived within an hour and threatened to arrest her for violating the closure order. Nate persuaded her to leave. "You taught me to fight," she told him. "I taught you to choose the ground. This is my ground. So stay alive long enough to reclaim it." Darlene locked the bakery door and handed him the key. "Then you hold this." Nate placed it in his pocket beside his apartment key, though neither key opened anything anymore. Maya subpoenaed Wesley's bank and Northlake's transaction files. The records showed that Rourke Urban Holdings was not merely struggling. It was insolvent. Wesley had personally guaranteed loans totaling $11 million. If the Grant Street sale failed, the bank could seize his home, office, and every remaining property. The Northlake contract included a $5 million vacancy bonus if Wesley delivered the block without protected residential tenants. His motive was no longer theoretical. He needed the covenant to disappear. Rachel spent the next day reviewing Claire's old emails. Most were routine: contractor estimates, tenant complaints, insurance renewals. Then she found messages Claire had scheduled to send to herself. One subject line read, "Maple, only if Wesley files." The message contained no attachment, only instructions. "Check the secretary. Do not confront him alone. The blue file is bait. The original does not sleep in this building." Rachel read the words aloud twice. Nate felt grief move through him in a new form. Claire had known enough to prepare a trap, yet she had not told him. Or perhaps she had tried. During the final month of her illness, Claire repeatedly asked him to visit her office. Nate always postponed it because the office smelled of paper, coffee, and the hand cream she used. Entering meant accepting that she would not return to it. He had mistaken avoidance for survival. Maya obtained a court order allowing a supervised search of the basement storage room. Wesley's attorneys argued that the maple desk had been destroyed. When the city marshal opened the room, the desk stood against the rear wall beneath a plastic tarp. Its hidden compartment was empty, but the drawer contained a digital voice recorder. The battery was dead. The memory card had been removed. Wesley's lawyer laughed when Maya presented the empty recorder at the next status conference. "This is not evidence," he said. "No," Maya replied. "It is evidence that something was removed. By whom? That is what discovery is for." Wesley leaned across the conference table after his attorney stepped outside. "You are humiliating yourself, Nate." Nate sat beside Maya, Amos at his feet. "Then, why are you here without your lawyer?" Wesley ignored the question. My father kept that block functioning while you collected praise for buying it. He repaired roofs, negotiated leases, chased contractors, and slept in his office when pipes froze. You appeared at ceremonies in your uniform and let people call you a hero. Your father was paid and respected. He was used. He was my friend. You always say that as though friendship settles an account. Nate heard Daniel Rourke in his son's cadence, but not in his words. Daniel had been blunt, funny, and incapable of hiding resentment. Wesley carried resentment like a private ledger. "What do you believe I owed him?" Nate asked. "Half of the block. He built half of it back, with covenant money, with his hands, and he received 20% of operating profits for life." Wesley's chair scraped against the floor. "He received scraps while you held the deed. Daniel refused an ownership share. That is a lie. He said ownership would make his creditors circle the place. He wanted his profit share paid to your mother while you were in college." Wesley went quiet. Nate continued. "Your father was trying to protect you. Don't speak about him. You brought him into this." Wesley leaned close. "He died believing you cheated him. No, he died afraid you would destroy yourself trying to prove it." Wesley struck the table with his palm, then immediately regained control. "You have 7 days to accept my offer. I will give you a lifetime residence in another building, full medical support, and $2 million. In return, you withdraw the deed challenge and acknowledge the sale. You are offering me money taken from property you claim is already yours. I'm offering you dignity. You threw my cane into the street." Wesley's breathing changed. Nate turned his face directly toward him. "You don't get to rename that." Wesley left without another word. The conversation revealed more than he intended. Maya had placed her phone on the table before he entered, but she had not secretly recorded him. Ashbridge required consent from at least one participant, and Nate had knowingly activated the voice recorder on his own phone through an accessibility command. Wesley had not confessed to forgery. He had, however, acknowledged that Nate had held the deed and that Daniel possessed only a profit share. It contradicted his sworn statement claiming his father's company had always been the equitable owner. It was useful. It was not enough. Owen Pike reappeared on the 6th day. He called Rachel from a bus station and asked her to come alone. She informed Maya and Officer Ortiz before going. Ortiz waited nearby while Rachel found Owen sitting beneath a departure screen with his briefcase between his shoes. He looked as though he had not slept. "I didn't destroy the records," he said. "Where are they?" "In 3 places, I learned from Claire." Rachel sat opposite him. "You helped Wesley forge my father's accounts." "Yes." "You helped him pretend my father was a tenant." "Yes. Why should I believe anything else?" "You shouldn't, but you should take this." He handed her a small brass key attached to a paper tag. The tag bore the number 614. Owen explained that Wesley had approached him 10 months earlier with proof of the missing operating funds. Wesley promised not to report the theft if Owen created a ledger showing large debts against the property. Owen fabricated maintenance loans, backdated invoices, and rent obligations. When Wesley decided to transfer title, Owen provided a scan of Nate's driver's license from the insurance files and Claire's old draft deed. "Did you forge his signature?" Rachel asked. "No, Wesley brought me a signed page." "Who notarized it?" "I never met the notary." "Did you know Dad was in the hospital?" "Not then. You knew before the eviction." Owen looked at the floor. "Yes." Rachel fought the urge to strike him. "What does the key open?" "A box at Union Station." "What is in it?" "The original accounting database, emails, and a recording Claire made 4 months before she died." Rachel's anger gave way to confusion. "You had Claire's recording." "She gave it to me. She knew someone was taking money from the operating accounts. At first she thought it was Wesley." "It was you." "Yes." "Why didn't she report you?" "She confronted me. I told her about my wife. Claire gave me 90 days to repay the money and resign. She said if I cooperated, she would keep it civil. But you went to Wesley." He already knew. He had been covering the withdrawals because he wanted leverage over me. Owen rubbed his hands together. Claire realized he was preparing something bigger. She created the two-dot blue folder and placed the obsolete deed draft inside. She said if it ever appeared in a county filing, we would know exactly where the forgery came from. Rachel stared at him. "Why didn't you tell my father?" Claire said she would. Then she became too sick. After she died, I convinced myself Wesley only wanted to restructure the management company. You watched them put Dad's furniture on the street. Owen's face collapsed. I know. No, you watched it happen. Knowing is what comes after when you finally have to live with yourself. Officer Ortiz entered after Rachel signaled through her phone. Owen did not resist when she told him the fraud unit wanted to speak with him. The key opened a station locker containing 2 encrypted drives, paper bank statements, the missing memory card from Claire's recorder, and a sealed envelope addressed to Nate. Maya played the recording in her office. Claire's voice filled the room, steady but tired. She spoke with Wesley in the Maple Desk office 4 months before her death. You asked for the original deed 3 times, Claire said. Why? For refinancing. You do not have authority to refinance. Daniel was promised ownership. Daniel signed an agreement rejecting ownership. Under pressure. He drafted the agreement himself. A chair moved. You and Nate hid behind paperwork while my father did the work, Wesley said. We protected the block from people who saw residents as obstacles. You mean people like me? I hope not. You always judged me. I watched you. There's a difference. Claire then told Wesley that the Grant Street properties could never be sold without approval from the Residential Covenant Board and the State Housing Authority. Wesley replied that covenants could be dissolved. Not this one, Claire said. The original deed is tied to a land reuse grant. Any unauthorized transfer automatically returns control to the successor trustee. Who is the successor? Claire paused. You do not need to know. The recording ended after Wesley left. Nate sat in silence. Rachel touched his shoulder. Who is the successor trustee? Maya asked. Nate answered reluctantly. Rachel. She pulled her hand away. You put my name on a property trust and never told me. Your mother did when you turned 25. I was 30 when she died. We believed secrecy protected you. From what? From exactly this. Rachel stood and walked toward the window. No, Dad, secrecy protected the arrangement. It did not protect me. Wesley still used me. I just had no idea what he was using me against. Nate had no defense. The emotional center of the case shifted. The block was not simply an asset Wesley wanted or a home Nate feared losing. It was a promise passed through a family that had stopped speaking honestly to one another. Nate told Rachel the full history. After the explosion that took his sight, he returned to Ashbridge unable to navigate his own kitchen without help. Nathaniel Brooks, his platoon sergeant, had dragged him from the burning vehicle in Iraq and later came home with injuries of his own. Daniel moved into a condemned room on Grant Street because no landlord would rent to him after a bankruptcy. Nate's mother, Evelyn Brooks, owned a small insurance agency. When she died, Nate inherited enough money to live comfortably. Instead, he and Claire bought the abandoned block through a state program that required permanent, affordable housing. Daniel oversaw construction. Claire designed the covenant. Nate held title because the state required one accountable trustee. The block became home to veterans, widows, working families, and business owners banks considered too risky. Daniel received a permanent profit share. He refused title because he owed money from a failed construction company and feared creditors would attack the trust. He also feared Wesley, then 22, would try to leverage the property for a string of speculative deals. Daniel had not been cheated. He had been protecting his son from inheriting power before learning restraint. There is a letter, Nate said. Daniel wrote it before he died. Claire kept it with the original deed. Maya asked, where is the original? Claire's recording said it did not sleep in the building. The state housing authority may have it. Maya contacted the authority. The response nearly destroyed the case. According to its files, the covenant had been released 8 months earlier by Nathaniel Brooks and successor trustee Rachel Brooks. Both signatures were notarized. With the release recorded, the state no longer claimed oversight. Rachel had supposedly signed the document on a day she was working a double shift at Ashbridge Memorial Hospital. The notary was Geraldine Sloan, the same name on the forged deed. Maya searched licensing records. Geraldine Sloan had been a real notary. She had died 2 years earlier. Wesley had built the fraud using a dead woman's commission information, believing no living notary could contradict him. But the discovery created another problem. The state authority admitted it could not locate the paper original of the covenant deed. Its archive had been moved after a flood, and several boxes remained unindexed. Without the original, Wesley's attorneys argued that the recorded releases controlled. The full evidentiary hearing began Monday morning. By then, Wesley had transformed the courthouse steps into a public campaign. He brought displaced tenants who had accepted relocation payments and encouraged them to describe the unsafe conditions on Grant Street. He blamed Nate for years of neglect and claimed Rourke Urban Holdings had stepped in to prevent tragedy. Some accusations were true. There had been delayed repairs. Nate had missed meetings. Claire's death had left invoices unanswered and maintenance disputes unresolved. Wesley used every real failure to make the larger lie appear reasonable. Inside the courtroom, Judge Cole warned both sides that sympathy would not determine ownership. Wesley testified first. He described Daniel's decades of work and claimed Nate privately acknowledged that the Rourke family deserved the property. He said Nate agreed to transfer the block after learning Owen had emptied the operating reserves. "Mr. Brooks understood that I was assuming a crisis," Wesley said. He was relieved. Maya approached for cross-examination. "Why did you list $10 as consideration? Standard practice. Why did you not list the alleged $2 million debt? It was reflected in separate agreements. Produce one." Wesley looked toward his attorney. Maya placed the altered ledger on the display screen. "This is the debt record you relied upon." "Yes. It was created by Owen Pike. Among others. Owen Pike has admitted fabricating it at your direction." Wesley's lawyer objected because Owen had not yet testified. Judge Cole allowed Maya to continue only with authenticated documents. Maya produced bank statements showing that no loan proceeds had entered the property accounts. Wesley said the loans had been paid directly to contractors. She showed that 3 named contractors did not exist. Wesley claimed Owen had deceived him. Then Maya played the recording Nate made during their private meeting. Wesley's voice filled the courtroom. "He received scraps while you held the deed." Maya stopped the audio. "You told this court your family had always been the equitable owner, yet in this conversation you accused Mr. Brooks of holding the deed and failing to give your father half. Which statement is true?" Wesley's composure weakened. "I was speaking emotionally." "You were speaking accurately." "No. You also offered Mr. Brooks $2 million to withdraw his claim, as a compassionate settlement. For property you insist he voluntarily transferred, to avoid litigation." Maya placed Claire's recording into evidence. Wesley denied knowing he had been recorded but did not deny his voice. When Claire stated that an unauthorized transfer would activate a successor trustee, Wesley looked toward Rachel. It was the first time he appeared to understand why her signature had also been forged. Rachel testified next. She described Wesley's attempts to obtain medical authorization, his questions about Nate's memory, and her hospital schedule on the day she supposedly signed the covenant release. Wesley's lawyer approached gently. "Ms. Brooks, your father concealed his ownership from you for most of your life, correct?" "Yes." "He concealed your role as successor trustee?" "Yes." "You expressed concerns about his isolation and memory." "I expressed concerns about his grief." "You are not a neurologist." "No." You cannot testify that he understood every document presented to him. No. Then it is possible he authorized Mr. Rourke to handle matters he later forgot. Rachel looked toward Nate. My father forgets birthdays, she said. He leaves coffee in the microwave. He pretends he is listening when he is actually checking baseball scores through one earbud. He does not forget whether he gave away the place where my mother spent half her life. Wesley's attorney stopped smiling. Officer Ortiz testified about the eviction, the missing deed, the damaged cedar box, and the process server's family connection. Deputy Mercer had been suspended after investigators recovered messages showing Wesley promised him a security position after the Northlake sale. Mercer had not forged the deed, but he had agreed to rush the eviction and disable his body camera while Wesley searched Nate's document box. A partial video recovered from the camera buffer showed Wesley carrying the two-dot blue folder toward his SUV. The footage did not show him taking the original deed. It did prove he had lied when he claimed never to touch the box. Owen entered under a cooperation agreement with prosecutors. He confessed to stealing from the operating account and altering the ledgers. He explained Claire's decoy folder and identified the obsolete survey draft Wesley used. Wesley's attorney attacked his credibility for nearly an hour. Owen admitted every lie. When asked why the court should believe him now, he looked toward Nate. It shouldn't believe me because I am sorry, he said. It should believe the records I was too afraid to destroy. The encrypted drives contained emails in which Wesley instructed Owen to build enough liability to justify assumption. Another message told him to use the old blue package for legal descriptions because county copies were difficult to edit. Still, Wesley's attorneys argued that the emails referred to legitimate restructuring. They insisted no witness had seen Wesley forge a signature. They claimed another employee could have misused the notary information. Maya requested permission to call Nate. He walked to the witness stand with Amos and took the oath. Wesley's attorney began by emphasizing Nate's blindness. You cannot visually identify the deed shown to the court, correct? I cannot visually identify you either, Nate said. That does not make you imaginary. A few people laughed before Judge Cole restored order. The attorney continued. You rely on others to read documents. I use screen reading software, braille, audio files, tactile markers, and trusted readers. Trusted readers such as your wife, who concealed information from you. My wife prepared for danger I refused to see. Such as Owen Pike, who stole from you. Yes, such as Wesley Rourke, for too long. So your judgment regarding trusted people has repeatedly failed. Nate did not evade the point. Yes. Then why should this court trust your interpretation of events? Because I am not asking the court to trust my interpretation. I am asking it to compare documents, dates, bank records, hospital logs, email instructions, and a dead notary's signature. The attorney changed direction. Did Daniel Rourke save your life? He did. Did he rebuild Grant Street? He helped rebuild it. Did you promise him partnership? I offered it, but he never received title. He declined it. Conveniently, the only man who could confirm that is dead. Nate reached into his coat pocket. Daniel expected you to say that. Maya stood. Your Honor, we request permission to introduce an item recovered this morning from the State Housing Archive. Wesley turned sharply toward his attorneys. A records supervisor had found the original deed less than an hour before court resumed. It was sealed inside a maple document case marked with Claire's handwriting. Attached to it was Daniel Rourke's notarized partnership waiver and a letter addressed to Wesley. Judge Cole allowed the deed to be examined by both sides. Its county seal was embossed through the paper beside a narrow crescent cut into the lower margin. Claire had created the cut so Nate could identify the original by touch. Maya placed the document beneath his fingertips. Nate traced the seal, the notch, and the raised impression of the surveyor's stamp. This is it, he said. Wesley's attorney objected that tactile identification proved nothing about legal validity. Maya agreed. Then she showed the court the decisive detail. The original deed's parcel numbers were correct. The recorded forged deed contained the transposed number from Claire's obsolete draft. The release filed with the housing authority repeated the same error, though it supposedly had been prepared months later by a different law office. Both fraudulent documents came from the bait folder Wesley removed during the eviction. Maya called the state records supervisor, who testified that the Maple case had been deposited by Claire 14 months before her death. It included instructions that the originals could be released only after any attempted transfer or covenant cancellation. Claire had not merely hidden the deed. She had created a documented chain of custody before Wesley's scheme began. Maya then opened Daniel's letter. Wesley's lawyer objected to reading it publicly, but Wesley spoke before the judge ruled. "Read it." Nate held the letter while Rachel read Daniel's words. Daniel wrote that Nate had repeatedly offered him an ownership interest, but he refused because of his debts and because Wesley had begun using borrowed money for reckless property deals. He feared that if his share passed to Wesley, the block would become collateral. He wrote that Grant Street had given him purpose after war, but it did not belong to the men who repaired it. It belonged to the promise they made to the people who lived there. The final lines were addressed directly to his son. "I know you think ownership is proof that a man mattered. It is. What you protect when no one can force you, that is the measure. If you ever gain power over this place, do not make frightened people pay for your fear of being ordinary." Rachel's voice faltered. Wesley stared at the table. For a moment, the courtroom contained no developer, veteran, lawyer, or accused man. There was only a son hearing his father's final judgment years too late. Judge Cole asked whether Wesley wished to continue his testimony. His attorneys urged him to invoke his right against self-incrimination. Wesley looked toward Nate. "You knew about the letter. I knew Daniel wrote one. Claire never let me read it." "Why not?" "She said it belonged to you." Wesley laughed once bitterly. "So everyone was protecting me. People tried. By deciding what I could handle, by hoping you would become someone who did not need to be stopped." Wesley's face tightened. "I spent my entire life watching him come home exhausted while people thanked you. Every plaque had your name, every newspaper story called you the founder. He did the work. He did work worth honoring. You could have put his name on the deed. He asked me not to. You expect me to believe he chose to own nothing." Nate leaned slightly toward the sound of his voice. "He chose not to own people's fear." Wesley looked at the original deed, the letter, and the bank records spread across the evidence table. Then he admitted enough. He said the company was collapsing. He said the bank would have taken everything Daniel built. He said the Grant Street sale was the only transaction large enough to save his employees and preserve his father's legacy. He claimed he never intended to harm tenants. He expected Northlake to relocate them. He believed Nate had abandoned the block and would eventually accept a settlement. Maya asked who forged the signatures. Wesley refused to answer. She asked who used Geraldine Sloan's expired notary seal. He remained silent. Judge Cole did not need a complete confession to decide title. She declared the deed to Rourke Urban Holdings void from its creation, reinstated the residential covenant, restored Nathaniel Brooks as trustee, confirmed Rachel Brooks as successor trustee, and issued an immediate injunction blocking the sale. The eviction orders and safety closures were vacated pending independent inspections. Control of the entire block returned to Nate, not in a dramatic transfer of keys, but through a judge's measured words, a stamped order, and the sudden realization on Wesley's face that he had evicted the legal owner from his own property. County investigators arrested Wesley in the courthouse corridor on charges of deed fraud, conspiracy, perjury, elder exploitation, obstruction, and filing false instruments. Additional charges followed after searches uncovered the dead notary's digital seal, draft medical capacity petitions, and payments to Deputy Mercer. Wesley was not dragged away shouting. He walked between two investigators with his shoulders straight, still trying to preserve the appearance of control. As he passed Nate, he stopped. "Are you satisfied?" Nate considered the question. "No." Wesley seemed almost offended. "You won. This was not supposed to become a contest." "What happens to my father's share?" "It remains what he made it. Support for your mother until her death, then the Veterans Emergency Fund." Wesley's expression shifted. "He left it to the fund." "He did. Of course he did." Nate heard the wounded son beneath the bitterness. "Your father loved you," he said. "He simply did not trust the part of you that believed love should arrive as property." Investigators led Wesley away. Owen pleaded guilty to embezzlement and conspiracy. Because he preserved the records and cooperated, he avoided a long prison sentence, but he lost his accounting license, sold his home to repay part of the missing money, and received 3 years of supervised confinement. Deputy Mercer was dismissed and charged with obstruction and official misconduct. The process server lost his license. The city opened an investigation into the inspection department after discovering that Wesley's complaints had received unusual priority. Northlake withdrew from the sale and later paid a settlement for continuing negotiations after learning that elderly and disabled tenants were being pressured to leave. The legal victories did not repair the block overnight. Several roofs genuinely leaked. Electrical systems needed replacement. The elevator required a complete modernization. Years of deferred work could not be blamed entirely on Wesley. Nate called a tenant meeting in Darlene's bakery 2 weeks after the hearing. Every chair was occupied. People stood along the walls and near the ovens. Nate sat at the same table where Maya had first searched the county records. He did not begin by celebrating. "I failed this block before Wesley attacked it," he said. "I withdrew after Claire died. I let one man control information that should have belonged to everyone. A deed made me trustee. It did not make me accountable unless I showed up." No one interrupted. He proposed a new governing board with elected tenant representatives, public quarterly accounts, independent audits, and limits on the trustees' authority. Rachel would serve as successor only after completing formal training and could be removed by a supermajority of residents for misconduct. Darlene asked the question everyone expected. "Are the rents going up?" "Not to fund my mistakes," Nate said. The state approved rehabilitation grants after the covenant was restored. Insurance covered some damage. The settlement funded accessibility upgrades and temporary housing while repairs were completed. Nate also sold a separate investment Claire had left him and placed the proceeds into the restoration fund. Rachel objected when she learned how much he contributed. "You need money for your own future." "This is my future." That answer is exactly how you ended up believing you could carry everything alone. Nate smiled. "Then help me decide how much is responsible." It was a small conversation, but it marked the beginning of a different relationship. Rachel stopped treating his silence as strength. Nate stopped using independence as a wall. Together they cleared Claire's office. They found handwritten notes in desk drawers, contractor receipts, photographs from the block's first renovation, and a list Claire titled "Things Nate Will Pretend He Need Help With." Rachel read it aloud. Number 1, asking for directions. Number 2, matching socks. Number 3, grief. Nate laughed for the first time in weeks. At the bottom, Claire had written one final item. Number 14, telling Rachel the truth before the truth has to introduce itself. Rachel folded the paper carefully and placed it in the repaired cedar box. 3 months later, residents returned to the renovated apartments. Darlene reopened the bakery with a new ventilation system and refused to let Nate pay for bread. The rebuilt rear staircase carried a brass plaque honoring Nathaniel Rourke, not as an owner, but as the construction superintendent who helped turn abandoned buildings into homes. Nate approved the plaque only after Rachel insisted. "His son did something terrible," she said. "That doesn't erase what Daniel did." "No," Nate agreed. "It doesn't." Wesley eventually pleaded guilty to several charges in exchange for dismissing others. He received a prison sentence measured in years, not decades, followed by restitution and a permanent prohibition from managing residential property. At sentencing, he did not apologize to Nate. He apologized to his employees, his mother's memory, and his father. Nate attended but did not speak. Justice did not require him to perform forgiveness for the person who harmed him. On the morning he moved back into apartment 3B, the repaired walnut table stood near the kitchen window. Rachel had found a carpenter who replaced the broken leg while preserving the old scratches Claire never allowed anyone to sand away. Darlene brought coffee. Maya brought the final recorded court order. Officer Ortiz brought Nate's cane, cleaned and fitted with a new tip. The last item Rachel carried upstairs was the cedar box. Its split lid had been joined with a visible brass seam. "I could have bought you a new one," she said. "I know. This one will never look perfect. That is not what I asked it to do." She placed it beneath the table and handed him two keys, the apartment key and Darlene's bakery key, which Nate had carried throughout the case. "You should return hers," Rachel said. "I tried. And she said every trustee should have a key to something that smells better than paperwork." Rachel laughed and started toward the door. Nate called her back. "There is one more document." He opened the cedar box and removed the amended trust agreement. The residents had already approved it. The state had already recorded it. Only Rachel's acknowledgement remained. She read the first page, then guided his hand to the signature marker. "You are sure?" she asked. "No more secrets," he said. They signed together. That evening, Nate sat at Claire's repaired table while voices rose from the sidewalk below. Children returning from school, Darlene closing the bakery, a contractor arguing cheerfully with a plumber. Amos slept beside Nate's chair. He reached into his pocket and placed the old apartment key on the table. On the morning Wesley threw him out, the key had opened nothing. The lock had been changed, the door taken, and his name buried beneath forged paper. Yet he had carried it because Claire once told him that a key was not proof of ownership. It was proof that someone expected you to return. Nate closed his hand around it and listened to the life of Grant Street moving through the walls again. Wesley had believed the block belonged to whoever could control its locks, its records, and its frightened residents. He discovered too late that the strongest ownership was not hidden in wealth or power. It lived in a promise, preserved by those willing to defend it when the door was shut against them.